Morgan Rielly, out of nowhere, signed an 8-year, $60 million contract extension. That's a $7.5 million cap hit. Like I wasn't expecting that at all. I think a lot of us were expecting Rielly to maybe play out the season, test
100%.
free agency, especially considering what a lot of these other defensemen signed for in the offseason. But I was really happy to see him re-sign. I think it's a great number, $7.5 million per. I think it's right around his market value. You know, a lot of people are saying that if he did test the open market, he probably would have gotten more than the Leafs signed him for. But, you know, when you look at the salary cap situation, you know, maybe there's a little bit of a concern seeing how the Leafs are paying 5 guys a lot of money, but they're not the only team in that situation. And Rielly is already making $5 million. It's a $2.5 million raise. You got Phil Kessel's $1.2 million retained salary coming off the books after this season.
People are forgetting about that. That was the first thing I thought of.
Really solid signing, Lepore.
Yeah, 100%. And you said it was a surprise. Like, I was shocked, Bruno. Shocked. Like, I think the tweet Leafs PR put out was 8 more years. And I was like, what? And then it's like open it's like I had the alerts set, and I can't believe it. And then I saw the number, and it's a totally fair number. And it's funny, like weird, man. It was like the day before, 2 days before, I'm driving with my nephew in the car after hockey, and small talking. I was telling him how the Leafs are going to play an outdoor game against the Sabres. And then you get in the conversation. I'm like, yeah, they'll probably come out with a new jersey for that game. And he's like, oh, well, like I'm going to want it. And I think I'll get Rielly this time because I don't have a Rielly. And I said to the kid, I was like, you know what, buddy? Probably not a good idea, because there's a very good chance Rielly's not going to play for the Leafs after this season. So kind of cool that like the next day we found out this news. And it's funny, man. Like, people always make the joke that the Leafs don't get nice things, or like you always hear like fan bases like mope and cry about how like, oh, like, why can't we have nice things? This contract for Rielly is a nice thing, man. Like, he got the 8 years, but 27. So he signed till he's 35. And there's the 10-team no trade clause that kicks in after year 6. So he can be traded, I mean, reasonably, like at that point. And so what more could the Leafs have asked for? Like, less money? Like, no, like, really? Like, I always wonder, like, you'll see a number come out for a signing, and the first thing that pops in my mind is always, okay, well, if it was 10 million, it's like, well, then what'd the player go in with? Or then like, what'd the team go in with? Like, this one, to me, like, all I can think is that like both sides came in pretty close. Like, Rielly must have sat down and said, guys, like, I want to stay. So like, let's make this happen. Just treat me reasonably and we'll get it done. And they did get it done. And if you want to question the value of it, I'll give you the list. I came across this list of defensemen in the National Hockey League and what they're getting paid. And make what you want of this list. It's not a list to start a debate of who's better or who's worse or who's overpaid or underpaid. But these are some of the highest paid defensemen in the league. Makar makes $9 million. Jones makes $9.5. Werenski 9.6. Heiskanen 8. Hamilton 9. Nurse 9.25. Hedman 9. Doughty 10.5. Carlson 11. Shabbat 8. Roman Josi 9.25. Alex Pietrangelo 8.8. Brent Burns 8. Subban 9.5. And Hughes 7.85. And in comes Morgan Rielly at 7.5. So
essentially perfectly slotted in. I think that number is as close as possible, I think, to what he's actually worth.
You think?
Simply as that. Like,
well, let's say if the Leafs could have done it and he would have got like 8 or 8.5, would you be like, man, that's an overpay?
I don't think the Leafs, because I would imagine that Rielly's camp came in probably wanting north of 8 or maybe even 8 on the nose.
Yeah. In free agency, he would have got 9. In free agency, he would have got 9.
And that's why, right? I think all Rielly had to do was say, look at what some of these D-men signed for, you know, a couple of months ago. And the 3 that stick out to me just based on age and how, you know, close they are to Rielly to a certain extent. You have Seth Jones, who signed an 8-year deal for 9.5 per. Then you have Nurse, who signed a long-term contract for 9.25. and Dougie Hamilton, who signed for $9 million per. And all those guys are about 1 year apart from each other. And
Nice.
Hamilton was the case where he actually went to free agency. And I get it. I think Dougie Hamilton's a better player than Morgan Rielly, but Morgan Rielly's very comparable to all three of those guys on a certain level. So to see him come in at 7.5, when you look at the contracts that those three guys got specifically, I think it's a really good number. I don't think the Leafs wanted to get too high just based on their salary cap situation, but I think they also understood this guy's our number one defenseman right now. He's been our number one defenseman for the last number of years. He's only 27 years old. He's a great skater. He produces a ton of offense from the back end, and not even just like the points that he produces, the way he jumps into the play, creates scoring chances. Like this team, Lepore, I was literally having very, very frightening thoughts thinking about how this defense core would look without Morgan Rielly playing 24 minutes a night. And especially 100%. Seeing how this defense core has played through the first 9 games this season. Imagine this D-core without Morgan Rielly, how awful it would look.
I'd rather not. No.
And that's why when you put it into perspective like that, you understand that this had to get done. Because as far as I'm concerned, Lepore, if they had let Morgan Rielly walk in free agency or even traded him, you're basically saying, okay, like it's over. Because how are you replacing him at that point? You're basically telling your top players, we just traded away or we just let our number one defenseman walk in free agency. Like, you know, the dream's over. We're not going for anything now. We might as well enter like a rebuild or a retool or whatever you want to call it, right? If you're going to lose a player as good as Morgan Rielly.
Or you're going to get hosed because everyone knows you're desperate,
exactly.
Right? But yeah, the Kessel thing was huge. Like I think a lot of people, when they saw that number, just quick math. Well, Rielly makes 5. Now he's going to make 7.5. The cap's not supposed to go up, or even if it does, they say it's going to be like $1 million. So like, how are the Leafs going to do this? That Kessel, I think it's like 1.15, 1.2 coming off the books. That's huge. That's absolutely huge. And there's other guys. We'll see if they're around, like the Mikheyevs of the world and stuff. So, I mean, I'm sure they projected it and they're going to be able to make it work. One very cool thing that somebody posted was George Armstrong, captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, the last time they won the Stanley Cup in 1967. He has the record for most games played by a Toronto Maple Leafs player with 1,187. If Rielly remains healthy during this deal, I think when this deal ends, and I may be getting this wrong, but I think the number was that when this deal ends, he'll be close. Like if he stays relatively healthy, he'll be close to that number. And it makes sense because he was in the lineup very early in his career. Was it his first year? His first camp, wasn't it? It was like
as a 19-year-old.
Yeah, I remember that was the big shock.
This team at 19.
Yeah, I remember that was the big shock that he just made the team. Everyone's like, "What?" Like the kid we drafted just now, but especially a defenseman. And of course, we had fears with what happened to Luke Shen before that, but it worked out for Mo. But it's cool. Like, I mean, we'll see if other guys re-sign, like the Matthews, the Marners, and Willie's, like young. So maybe they would have a shot at that number as well. But I don't think anyone would have a problem if Rielly ends up clipping George Armstrong for that record.
Yeah, and right now, as it stands, Lepore, Rielly has played 581 games as a Leaf. So the math sort of checks out. He plays another 8
passes
seasons.
Then 82 if he plays every game, but yeah, like he's got a chance to beat it. Yeah,
and obviously there might be injuries and stuff like that, but for the most part he's been a very durable player, Morgan Rielly. The only season really where he missed a chunk of time was during the COVID season, where I forgot what it was it like a fractured leg or something like that? I can't remember. It was a lower body injury. He only played 47 out of 70 games back in 1920, but that was essentially the 1 year that he missed time. And
that season was a blur. Everybody got hurt. Remember, exactly. All those injuries are a blur.
And he's a guy that's just been through it all. You know, like I said, he's been here since he was 19 years old, going back to 2013, 2014 in his rookie season. You know, he's seen it all with this team. He's been here through all the collapses, all the coaching changes, all the managerial changes. And I think it speaks volumes because you could see how much his teammates respect him. He's one of the leaders on this team, both from the way that he plays and from, a vocal standpoint in the locker room, the things that he does in the community. He's a very, very important part of this team. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say he's an elite defenseman, Lepore. I'm not going to put him in the category of, Victor Hedman and Cale Makar and guys who I think are the top defensemen in the league. But if you go down to that next tier of, let's call them, good to great players, I mean, Morgan Rielly's right there.
I've always called him a 1B. He's a 1B. He's not a 1A. He's a 1B. Bruno, before I forget, how many games played you say he has right now?
581.
581. So that means, he would pass it. He'd have 1237 if he played all 82 games every season. So assuming he misses some, he's got a chance.
Yeah, he's going to get really close to that.
Or he'll still only be 35 when that deal's up. So he takes a few league min deals a la Jason Spezza to win his 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th Stanley Cups, right?
I love it, Lepore. I love it, man.
Why not?
And you know what? He's a guy also, Morgan Rielly, that I think he's going to age well just by the way that he skates and how he plays. And you know what? He doesn't get enough credit. Like, he's a strong guy. And it's not like he's going out there, blowing guys up and laying 5-6 hits a night. But he's a really, really solid, solidly built dude who can get in the corners. And again, he's not overly physical, but I like the way that he plays. And I think that he's going to age well just based on his skating ability and his offensive sense for the game. So I give it the stamp of approval. I think it's a really solid deal at $7.5 million. And I'm happy. I'm happy for Morgan Rielly and for the Leafs that he's going to be sticking around for a long time.
Yeah. It's one of those deals I look at where I think it's very unlikely that a time's going to come during that deal where we'll be like, shit, like, I wish we didn't have this. Like,
and especially when the cap goes up, because it's going to go up eventually.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's been a flat cap situation for the last little while, mostly because of COVID. And once the cap just continues to go up, the contract it's going to look fine.
Yeah.
I don't think people are going to be pissed off.
Every second defense, like number 2 defenseman, is going to be making $7+ million. So
exactly. And that's the thing, right? He's a top pairing defenseman, and that's the number you got to sign these guys to. And it's really as simple as that.
Awesome, man. Awesome.